I will also try, as a matter of courtesy, to say a few words in Spanish in the beginning. Han pasado probablemente 20 años desde la última vez que yo hablé español. Por esa razón, mi presentación será en inglés. Como director de DARIAH, tengo que mantener un aire de dignidad lingüística y lo puedo hacer mucho mejor en inglés que en español. Como individuos, aprendemos y olvidamos idiomas, pero como sociedad hacemos lo mismo. El conocimiento es efímero, se adquiere y se pierde todo el tiempo. Necesitamos las infraestructuras de investigación como instrumentos culturales, como instrumentos contra el olvido. Es un verdadero placer para mí estar aquí. Muchas gracias a la UNED por la invitación y a todos ustedes en esta sala o en otros lugares a los que están siguiendo este evento de manera remota. Gracias. Now I can relax because this is much less stressful for me when I have to do it in English. How do I advance to the next slide? Oh, there we go. I have to start with a confession. Whenever I try to talk, to give a talk about DARIAH or more broadly about research infrastructures, I do so with some trepidation. This psychodrama of mine started sometime last year when I was giving a keynote at the Eva Minerva Conference on Cultural Heritage in Jerusalem. And as I was going through my slides, literally half an hour before starting the presentation, I received a text message from a friend of mine from Berlin, which started with a very ominous first sentence. It said, "Brace yourself for a catastrophe." Now, in my scholarly work, all I do is deal with words. I work on lexical data modeling, on retro-digitizing historical dictionaries, and on creating digital editions. So I know that catastrophe is a very strong word. But I also know that narratives in general, and our communication strategies in particular, are always conditioned by culture and ideology. We grow up speaking and feeling different languages. And so I wasn't too surprised that my Serbian friend used the word catastrophe to trump up the fact that the roof over my top floor apartment in Berlin had leaked and that the apartment was flooded. I found it incredibly ironic that I was there at the Van Leer Institute in Jerusalem pondering why the humanities need an infrastructure, when back in Berlin, a much more basic infrastructure was failing me. Infrastructures in general have a tendency to disappear out of sight. Once the novelty of their implementation wears off, they tend to become invisible or self-evident. When I took an Uber this morning, in the beginning, I didn't think about the road as an infrastructure, but the moment we got stuck in traffic, it dawned on me, something's not right. So we become aware of the infrastructure as infrastructure usually when it breaks down. Also, when infrastructures remain visible, they usually do so by their absence. In places where they do not exist and where their lack is a very clear indicator of large-scale social inequalities and injustices. The moral of the story is water pipes break, roofs leak, but that's still better than not having roofs or water pipes at all. Ever since Jerusalem, however, I have this uneasy feeling about talking about research infrastructures as something dangerous. I don't want to jinx things. And so later when I check my text messages, I'll just be, praying to God that nothing went bad in my apartment. So what is an infrastructure? There's one definition that I like very much because it covers a broad range of phenomena. It's from Badenoch and Vickers, and it says that infrastructures are mediating interfaces, structures in between, that allow things, people, and signs to travel across space by means of more or less standardized paths and protocols for conversion or translation. And it's really no different when we talk about digital research infrastructure. A digital research infrastructure is a mediating set of technologies for conducting research, enabling resource discovery and collaboration, and facilitating dissemination of scholarly output. But at an even more basic level, they are also about moving signs from point A to point B using standardized paths and protocols for conversion or translation. Infrastructures, however, are also strong cultural and political symbols. From electricity systems in the 20s to the gateways and bridges on Euronodes in the present decade, infrastructures have been mobilized repeatedly in broader spheres as symbols and metaphors for various forms of modernization, integration, and cooperation. Infrastructure projects have always been seen as motors of change, propelling society into a better and brighter future. Yet precisely because those human-built material links between nations across borders in Europe predated, accompanied, and transcended the official processes of political and economic integration, it would be all too tempting and all too easy to approach the question of digital research infrastructures uncritically, by getting caught in the moment and embracing the master narratives of efficiency and progress without discussing the larger and more complex implications of institutionalized networked research. A research infrastructure is not only a tool that needs to be built, it is also a phenomenon that needs to be understood. What makes up a research infrastructure? Well, there's actually lots of things: tacit and explicit knowledge, networks and communities, software and services, research data collections, labs and instruments, buildings and facilities. We are sitting in one infrastructural node, a university. What is infrastructural about them, however, is the manner in which they are made available, interoperable, and sustainable. Without these aspects in place, these elements may exist, but within a silo that cannot be shared and reused at a level beyond the walled garden of a project with a limited user group or time limit. But looking at this list, one question almost rises by default. Do the humanities specifically need a research infrastructure? The technical and material biases that endure in the discourse of research infrastructures also create biases in the general perception of what disciplines require it. Yet, it was arguably in the field of the humanities that the idea of a research infrastructure was first born, in the form of the famed Library of Alexandria. But the researcher requirements in the 21st century, even in the arts and humanities, are no longer covered completely by the library or archive, even the digital one. The gradual bifurcation between the keepers of the sources and facilitators of the activity was not so much a problem when access to sources was predicated on occupying the space of a particular holder of rights and knowledge about source material, be that a library, archive, museum, or indeed a publisher. Digital cultural heritage institutions are being challenged in their capacity to maintain what is produced by researchers as production moves from shelves to computer racks, in their capacity to enable new methodology in the move beyond reading to distant reading, and in their capacity to maintain high upfront investment required for traditional cataloging and metadata production, as well as their capacity to federate meaningfully across thematic and institutional boundaries. The classical model of the library was both an archive and a temple. The library was a defense against decay and destruction, an institution that preserved not only a system of values, but also certain rituals of using knowledge. The book as a physical object, and consequently a model of text that is final and unchangeable. The interesting thing, of course, is that the library itself was evolving over time with the development of new technologies and continues to evolve to this day. When the printing presses started churning out books at an unprecedented scale, not everybody was thrilled. So consider this. At the end of the 15th century, Filippo de Strata, a monk and scribe in the Benedictine community of San Cipriano in Murano, wrote a little booklet, a little text called Polemic Against Printing, claiming that clumsy and unreliable print editions had debased the book. By making book ownership more common, print also diminished the luster of the Renaissance library, causing many collections to dwindle or dissolve altogether as the library as a cultural institution was trying to adapt to the new age. He compared the printing presses to prostitutes who, and I quote, sap the strength of the young by fostering wantonness. This is what he wrote. This is what the printing presses do. They corrupt susceptible hearts. Yet the silly asses do not see this, and brutes rejoice in the fraudulent title of teachers, exalting themselves with a song like this. O good citizen, rejoice, your city is well stuffed with books. For a small sum, men turn themselves into doctors in 3 years. Let thanks be rendered to the printers. Any uncultured person without Latin bowls these things. And I'm fascinated by Strata's fight against the printing presses because it shows that technophobia is not an invention of the late 20th century, and that resistance to change is not a very original social mechanism. And because it shows that there were always people who considered technology to be and represent the other of the humanities. Yet technology is not and has never been the other of the humanities. That doesn't mean that we should champion technology uncritically, sweep the difficulties under the rug, and jump on the bandwagon of techno-fetishism en route to some kind of glorified DH utopia. On the contrary, we need to think long and hard about our tools and methods. We need to be self-reflective, not only about theories, but also the practicalities of how we do research. We need to resist the urge to naturalize older technologies and older infrastructures, to treat them as neutral or as a given, the way De Strata treated medieval manuscripts. The main difference between a material artifact and its digital surrogate is in their inherent value. The value of a material artifact is in itself, aesthetically, intellectually, culturally. The value of a digital artifact is in what you can do with it. So today we have not hundreds, not thousands, but millions of digital artifacts, text, sounds, images that represent across a huge time span the human record. What are we going to do with all these objects? The question really becomes, what are we doing with culture, both in terms of heritage and contemporary production? What are the modes of reading our cultural heritage? Are we focusing only on a tiny percentage of canonical works, or are we trying to use all available methods to probe it, challenge it, and transform it? DH encompasses a wide range of scholarly activities, ranging from digital philology and the creation of digital editions on the one hand, to text mining, distant reading, and algorithmic criticism on the other side of the spectrum, to name just a few of the representative strands. But members of DH as a community of practice deal with digital objects not as static artifacts, but rather as complex, multidimensional, and multi-layered data sets that need to be analyzed, annotated, and manipulated in order to arrive at new knowledge about them. But you don't have to be a digital humanist to be using digital tools. Everybody uses digital tools nowadays. It would be hard to find a scholar, no matter how traditional they are, who don't. John Unsworth conceptualized back in 2000 so-called scholarly primitives as basic functions which are common to any scholarly activity in the humanities, independent of discipline, theoretical orientation, or era. He suggested 7 recursive and interrelated scholarly primitives: discovering, annotating, comparing, referring, sampling, illustrating, and representing, which he saw as the basis for tool-building enterprises in the digital humanities. Since then, Unsworth's scholarly primitives have been often utilized and further revised or refined, but they remain a good starting point for understanding what type of activity digital and analog humanists are engaged in. Returning to scholarly primitives is important as a kind of checklist to see how we develop our digital collections or our scholarly outputs. What are the formats, standards, and delivery methods that we use? To what degree is the data that we produce open and accessible? Can I run my tools on your data? Can I see other people's annotations? Can I add my own? What digital humanists need are smart digital collections in which a text or an image is not only an object, but a service, not a static entity, but an interactive method. The digital artifact must be computationally exploitable so that it can be sampled and used, not simply passively absorbed in its entirety. Such a radically atomistic approach to digitized cultural heritage poses a host of challenges: legal, ethical, technical, and intellectual, to name just a few. But it opens up the possibility of creative engagement with them through text mining, statistical comparison, data visualization, hypertextual systems, etc. The digital library, museum, archive of the future is not only the virtual distributed place where digital objects live, but rather a place in which they interact in a meaningful and productive way with each other and with various tools for scholarly analysis. In an ideal world, DH-friendly collections become infrastructural nodes. They provide access to machine-readable and machine-computable artifacts. They developed well-documented APIs for both metadata and full content access. They offer layers of automatic and semi-automatic structural, linguistic, and semantic annotations with support for crowdsourced corrections. They integrate, I mean, this is my personal hobby horse, they integrate dictionaries and other types of reference services, and they provide mechanisms for data enrichment workflows. And let me give you just one example of what I mean by data enrichment workflows. This is an example from Google Books. It is a Serbian oh, you don't see it because I didn't advance the other, sorry. This is an example from Google Books. It's a Serbian 18th century dictionary. And it's also an example of what I would claim is the worst OCR in the history of the world. It is amazing because it doesn't contain a single correct word, right? A single correct word in Slaveno-Serbian or German. And of course, this is an older OCR. I'm not minimizing the progress that has been done, and the tools for OCR have become much, much better over time. But they still, there are difficulties with multiple scripts. You have the German Fraktur, you have the old Cyrillic, etc. And the funny thing is that even a couple of seemingly correct words, like fällige in German or boga in Serbian, are actually false positives. Fällige should be heilige and boga should be bog, etc., but spelled differently, etc. So it's a complete mess. Now, imagine this is part of your digital collection. Some professor will check out this work from the library, do some work with the class, correct the mistake, annotate them, do some data enrichment on this text, use it in for educational purposes. But all that knowledge that was created surrounding the library text will never make it back into the library. Knowledge that we create as researchers is often very, very ephemeral and very brittle. It happens in particular contexts, in particular silos, but we still don't have the appropriate workflows to connect the knowledge that's created around certain digital objects and bring them back to the libraries. That's, I think, a very good example why we need research infrastructures and why we need infrastructural thinking about the humanities, so that we can avoid this continuous reduplication of effort and the forgetting that happens when you don't preserve the knowledge which is created. It's as simple as that. It should come as no surprise that one of the most important challenges facing digital humanities today is how to consolidate and repurpose available tools, how to create reusable but flexible workflows, and ultimately how to integrate and disseminate knowledge instead of merely capturing and encapsulating it. This technical and intellectual shift is what makes the infrastructural turn in digital humanities. Now, all disciplines have infrastructural needs for data, for specialist knowledge, for methodological support, for storage, and for processing power. The arts and humanities need shared research infrastructure as much as any other discipline. And this is the crucial and the most important thing to take away from today, I think, is that because often when we talk about infrastructures, colleagues from, or when I talk to my friends, they will say, yeah, but you are not, you're not proper scientists. You're not conducting physical experiments. Why do you need an infrastructure? Well, because infrastructure is a much more complex term that envelops all the kinds of research activities that we do. And trying to pull off something like this, a European infrastructure on large scale, is quite difficult to do. Luckily, this need for long-term planning and infrastructural investment has been recognized by the European Commission. So the European Strategy Forum on Research Infrastructures, or ESFRI, was set up in 2002. The ESFRI's delegates are nominated by research ministries from EU member and associated countries, and they include a Commission representative. The ESFRI has a key role in policy making on research infrastructures in Europe. Its goal is to support a coherent and strategy-led approach to policy making on research infrastructures and to establish a European roadmap for research infrastructures for the next 10 to 20 years, stimulate the implementation of these facilities, and update the roadmap as necessary. DARIAH itself was long in the making, from 2006, when it was included in the ESFRI roadmap, to 2014, when it officially became an ERIC, European Research Infrastructure Consortium. Now, ERIC is a specific legal form to facilitate the establishment and operation of research infrastructures with European interest. The ERIC legal framework provides a European joint venture model, which also allows the participation of non-European countries, and a legal capacity recognized in all EU member states. DARIAH has 17 member countries today, and this is also important to understand that to join DARIAH, you don't join DARIAH as individual researcher or even as institutions. It is countries that join DARIAH. It takes a government willing to invest in research infrastructures to actually officially apply and become part of the research infrastructures. Although we do have a mechanism within DARIAH for countries that are not yet members, institutions can apply to become so-called cooperating members. And cooperating members, the membership is free. It gives you access to everything that we do. but you don't get to have, as a country, voting rights in the decisions that are made. Countries pay, and currently we have cooperating partners from Bulgaria, Finland, Hungary, Norway, Romania, Sweden, Switzerland, and United Kingdom. So even though we have 17 member countries, we have more cooperating partners from a range of other countries. Now, countries pay annual fees, which is calculated based on the GPD, gross domestic product. So this is what we refer to as cash contributions. This is what the ministry pays for the country to be part of DARIAH. And then there is another mechanism which is called in-kind contribution, which is the way that scholarly communities of member countries contribute their outputs to DARIAH as in-kind contributions. So tools that are developed, services that are developed, training schools that are organized in a particular country, they can all be counted as so-called in-kind contributions, something that you give and share with the rest of your European colleagues. To be a DARIAH member, countries must organize themselves and their research bases in order to share the tools, data, and knowledge that are developed locally, prioritizing reuse and integration over the development of centralized shared services from scratch. And if I try to explain why should a country join DARIAH, I think it comes down to two most important reasons. One is more abstract and ideological, and one is very practical. Europe, despite its proverbial identity crisis, we all talk about Europe is in crisis, but when was it not in crisis? I mean, it's kind of defines Europe. It's a continent in crisis. Despite all its proverbial identity crisis and serious challenges which it faces today, Europe remains to be a powerful symbolic space in which tradition and innovation are inherently intertwined. When countries join DARIAH, their governments make an important statement about the value of the humanities and the value of Europe. It's especially important for the humanities not to be parochial, not to be limited by our own cultural biases, linguistic perspectives, and the heavy burden of tradition. But in very practical terms, joining DARIAH enables humanities scholars in a country to set their own priorities, to work with the ministries on strengthening and building national resources as well. So I would urge you all to see DARIAH not only as a big European party, but as an opportunity to create your own national roadmap and think strategically about the digitally enabled humanities research in your own country. On the one hand, DARIAH has a very traditional chain of command, with an executive team reporting to a board of directors, who in turn answer to a general assembly of funders or ministries who support DARIAH, and who oversee a national coordinating institution and team as well. But operating alongside this hierarchy and feeding into it is a second structure optimized for knowledge sharing and inflow into the organization. A set of 4 so-called virtual competency centers, or VCCs, act as gateways and quality assurance nodes to the contributions, not just of the national in-kinds, but also from associated research projects and transnational working groups established under the DARIAH umbrella. Our stakeholder map is really, I don't know if you can't really see it, but we address different stakeholders, project partners, different ERICs like Clarin, various communities in academia, in the GLAM sector, the libraries, galleries, museums, etc. Private companies, general public, of course, because we all care about the humanities. We are not just about technology. The technology is there just to support us to do our research. What we actually care about is humanities. Another set of stakeholders include member countries, cooperating partners, and DARIAH working groups that I will explain in a little while. Now, DARIAH has 4 strategic pillars at the moment. One is the marketplace. we are building, our goal is to enable access to research solutions, tools, services, data, workflows, know-how, also aiming at researchers who don't regard themselves as digital humanities. The second pillar is education and training, complementing traditional training with corresponding material and alternative teaching methods, workshops, summer schools, hackathons, etc. An important part of what DARIAH does is policy work, making the voice of the arts and humanities heard in research policy discussions, promoting nascent policies to our communities. And finally, one of the bedrocks of DARIAH are its working groups, bottom-up, self-organizing transnational research teams. And this is something that's, I believe, unique to DARIAH, because other infrastructures are not necessarily organized in this way and don't necessarily have working groups. So the working groups provide benefit both for the infrastructure and the participants. They ensure that DARIAH is aware of and meeting the emergent needs of research communities in the humanities, and in turn gives a platform for engagement with them. For the researchers, it provides a lightweight transnational mechanism to organize themselves. In addition, some funding and opportunities to meet and showcase their activities are part of the annual DARIAH meetings, which also encourage exchange and sharing among the groups. More than anything else, however, they facilitate input from the most granular level of the DARIAH stakeholder community, individual researchers and research projects, with needs at the cutting edge of the technical or knowledge landscape they have access to locally. We have some 20 working groups working at the moment, and we don't have time to go into the details, but you can find out what's out there. The important things like text and data analytics, visual media and interactivity, geohumanities, women writers in history, etc. The important thing to keep in mind is that these are organized by researchers themselves. So if a group of researchers from DARIAH member countries or anywhere decides that they would like to form a DARIAH group, working group, there's a process in which you apply, you explain your goals, you set your goals, etc., and then you're approved. So it's really bottom up. We as the board of directors do not tell researchers what working groups they need. This is a way for researchers to organize themselves and to add to this social layer of the infrastructure by organizing themselves in working groups. Some of our higher level principles are that we are community driven, we are inclusive, addressing the humanities as a whole, not the digital humanities in particular. We promote openness. We recently hired a full-time open science officer. We are enabling transnational collaboration. We are promoting standards and best practices. And we have a strong focus on teaching and training, delivering easy-to-use services, resources, and solutions. And again, if I wanted to tell you about all the different services created within DARIAH, it would take much longer than what I have at my disposal. But I'll just mention a couple of contributions from member countries that are DARIAH contributions to give you a sense of the kind of things that are being worked on. Hypothesis.org is a platform for scholarly blogging. It's available in, actually, I even think in Spanish, in English, French, and Spanish. We have HAL, which is an open access repository, also from France, where you can deposit your papers, your data, whatever you want. We have a service called Calendar, which lists scholarly events across Europe. On the more technical side of things, we have the AAI, the single login infrastructure. So each DARIAH researcher has a permanent, persistent identity across the services. We organize summer schools, training materials. We've had a project called DARIAH Teach, which created a platform for sharing training materials. Another example of one of these contributions is the Digital Humanities Course Registry. It started as a DARIAH course registry, but has been also picked up by Clarin, and now this is a joint project. So DARIAH and Clarin work together on listing all the digital humanities courses across Europe with an interactive map, etc. So if you want to find out where you can go to learn about digital humanities, this is one way to do it. We were recently also, as part of this DARIAH project, at a workshop at the Library of Congress in the United States, and I know that there was a great deal of interest from our American colleagues to join and represent their classes and their courses in this registry. So I hope that it will continue to grow. And finally, another good example of tools developed within DARIAH is Textgrid. It comes from Germany, and it's a virtual research environment for researchers in the text-based humanities to create, analyze, edit, store, and publish their research data. Of course, because we believe in openness, all of these are accessible to anyone, including, Spanish researchers who are not yet part of DARIAH. So if you are interested, you can go download Textgrid and start using it if you're working on textual data. But I want to mention one more thing, which is, I think, of huge importance and which transcends all these individual services. Within DARIAH, we have a body which is called the National Coordinators Committee. So each country has two officials in DARIAH. One is the national representative, and that's usually somebody from the ministry. They are members of the General Assembly. And then countries also have national coordinators who organize the day-to-day activities in their countries. And one of the goals of the DARIAH National Coordinators Committee is to define and coordinate 17 national roadmaps. So this is a body in which we can strategically explore complementarities and gaps, because one of the challenges is, you don't want to start reinventing the wheel. So what we want to try at the European level is to see and establish where our competencies lies, where are the gaps, who can help whom with what tools we can use from another country instead of developing our own, etc. And that's why this National Coordinators Committee has a unique position in the DARIAH landscape. It also shows that DARIAH can help create and implement a common vision for how digital tools can be developed, shared, and used in the humanities research across Europe. One other thing that's worth mentioning in this context is, and I'm sure some of you have already heard about this, is that the Commission is working on the establishment of a so-called European Open Science Cloud, or EOSC. It's a general cloud for research data of all fields. The EOSC declaration was signed in October 2017. And it's meant to help with data culture, open access, data stewardship, FAIR principles, standards, data management plans, technical implementation, legal aspects for all disciplines in Europe. DARIAH, together with Clarin and other partners, is representing the humanities in EOSC. And recently we won a grant from the Horizon 2020 infrastructure call, implementing the European Open Science Cloud, to develop something that we call Social Sciences and Humanities Open Cloud, or SHOC. It's my favorite abbreviation. And as part of the SSH contribution to the European Open Science Cloud, we will be developing a platform that we call the SHOC Marketplace. Again, this is something that started as a DARIAH marketplace, but grew out, beyond DARIAH, and now includes partners like Clarin and others. The marketplace, which the project starts in January next year, so the implementation. The marketplace will be a platform, but a point for entry for finding resources and solutions for the digital aspect of research. Resources can be software and tools, as well as data sets, but mainly services which are ready for direct use. Solutions are conceived as complex objects based on research question, task, or story, accompanied by references to further training material, referencing the resources needed to solve given task. The rationale behind it is to focus on the methodical, dynamic aspects of the research process, to enable sharing and reuse not just of resources but workflows and methodologies, and to promote open methods next to open data and open source. Now, one could say, is this really yet another tool registry? Because one of the things that we've seen over the years with DARIAH is that many people have tried to create registries and lists of things and tools. And it was always, I had mixed feelings about them, because it was always very difficult to curate these and to guarantee that they don't run out of, that they remain valid for a long period of time. But the other problem with registries of any kind is that they often lack contextualization. You know, just listing tools does not necessarily help you with knowing what tools do or how you can use them. And so what we are trying to achieve with the SHOC marketplace is to provide, register tools, but provide contextualization, link them with training materials, show narratives about how the tools were used in different projects, etc. So it's a much more elaborate and ambitious plan to create a true marketplace where you can go and learn and find out about what it is that people use in digital humanities, but from the perspective of a researcher who wants to solve certain problems, who has tasks that he or she wants to accomplish. So we will have, related material like code, data, tutorials. User will be able to find things even that they were not looking. You can think of the marketplace as a although I shouldn't use any Mac metaphors because it didn't work for me today, but as the app store for the humanities, right? It will include communities with, user feedback, comment sections, maybe even ratings, popularity measures. We'll see about that. Assessment, helping people decide if something is useful for a specific purpose or not. And finally, support. It will help us gain access to related training materials, or links to who's in charge of a certain tool, where we can ask questions, etc. So it's really, as I said, a much more complex, evolved idea of a tool registry. To counteract obsolescence, a strong focus will be put on the curation and quality assurance of the information gathered, and on devising a sustainable governance model, including the building of a community around the marketplace to ensure its durability. In order to strengthen the adoption and reuse of the offered resources, the task will explore and devise ways to make these services compatible with and easily pluggable to other systems. Because, of course, one of the challenges will be how to harvest the data. Some of it will have to be entered manually, but if you want to create something at this level, you also want to automatize processing and be able to harvest metadata and get some things in an automatic way. Special focus there will be on virtual labs and data science notebooks such as Jupyter or R Markdown. These are increasingly popular and strikingly simple and effective tools to share and reproduce procedures and workflows. The goal is widespread adoption of best practice compatibility mechanisms by the providers, especially offering well-defined REST APIs for both processing and visualization services, and also for data services. Now, building a research infrastructure is not easy. The entire field of digital humanities is evolving against the backdrop of global capitalism in its electronic mode, the so-called e-empire, which is sustained by a loose assemblage of relations characterized by flexibility, functionality, mobility, programmability, and automation. It would be naive to think that our field is immune to the economic and ideological tensions that characterize information capitalism. It would be even more naive to think that we can build expensive transnational digital research infrastructures that will function in some abstract network space unburdened by politics and ideology. Which is why it's so important for us to be taking a community approach, taking into account both the super user and the marginal case as we seek to meet the baseline infrastructural requirements of scale, openness, durability, and fitness to broad purpose. It is also important to remember that in another departure from the old models of the bricks and mortar infrastructure, digital research infrastructure will be a moving target, never able to be viewed as completed or finished. Things are not easy because we need to better understand the political capital of a digital infrastructure. What is the extent of its sovereignty? And how can we make sure that the digital infrastructure, not even the one we are trying to build today, but the future one, the one that we hope to build one day, does not turn from being a power grid into a grid of hegemonic power? The logic of infrastructure is the logic of industrial society. It is based on normativity, mass production, serialization, and ultimately social discipline. As we build a digital infrastructure for the humanities, how do we make sure we don't end up locking ourselves in, disciplining ourselves to the point that technical protocols become our only destiny, the limits of our intellectual horizons? I already said at the beginning of this talk that when infrastructures remain visible, they usually do so by their absence. We should ask ourselves about the implications of digital infrastructure projects for the dynamics between those who are in and who are out. Can we create a truly European infrastructure? What about beyond Europe? What are the actual physical limits of a scholarly infrastructure? There's a wonderful scene in My Fair Lady at the Embassy Ball where Professor Higgins meets a former student, Nepomuk, who claims he speaks 32 languages and knows everyone in Europe. He says Liza Doolittle is a Hungarian princess because of her manners and because she speaks English too well. And I love that you know, if you speak English too well, you can't be a native speaker. There must be something artificial about it. So DARIAH is neither a Hungarian princess nor a flower girl turned high society debutante, but we do speak many languages, and we know not everybody, but lots of people in Europe. And we would love to have Spain join us. Thank you very much for bearing with me.
Thank you very much, Toma. I think that your talk has been very clarified, and we can now understand better what means DARIAH and what is for, and what is the relation with digital humanities. I suppose everybody knows, but I think it's a great opportunity. I want to highlight two ideas of your talk. That one is that in the research process and in the learning process, we produce a lot of knowledge, and we need some kind of infrastructure to maintain this knowledge and to spread out this knowledge in the world. And then I think that the infrastructure is probably the best tool to do it. And the second is, I think it's very important in a country like Spain, is that this is a chance to talk, to share ideas about what will be the national roadmap for the digital humanities research process in our country. I think that can be a great opportunity to join to DARIAH and try to be part of this community, and probably that's help us to clarify as well our roadmap. So I think this is the two main ideas that at least I take for your speech. I'm sure that there are more, and the people who is here in the room and online has taken his own ideas. And I would like to to ask you just only a question, because I think it's a very important question for all the people who is researching in digital humanities. And the question is simple. I don't know the answer, but the question is simple. It is possible to test, for example, the marketplace tools that has DARIAH in order to have an idea of how it works and if it's really useful for the research process in digital humanities, because we are not now in DARIAH, and I don't know really if it's possible for our research group to test these tools. The marketplace.
It will. No, but I mean the marketplace is not built yet. The project that we got the funding for starts in January, and it's a simple question, but it's a very complicated answer. And
I know.
Let me try.
It's because I asked you.
let me try to clarify. So first of all, the marketplace, started as a metaphor for what we do, because we have an internal DARIAH tool that collects in-kind contributions. So we have a tool where we have a list of hundreds and hundreds of tools that people have produced and submitted. But it's an internal tool that is very clunky, and it was not created for public use. So this is something that we've been using internally in DARIAH, but we've realized that we need something much better than that. And that's where this funding came in, and that's why we will be building the marketplace starting in January. So you will have to wait a little longer to actually get access to the marketplace. But you will be able to, even if you're not, because it will be very open, you'll be able to use it, but you will also be able to contribute to it with your tools. If you want, it's a way to showcase Spanish research, to say, look, we are doing this important work as well. You will be able to submit tools to the marketplace. So in that sense, it will be a perfectly open tool accessible to everybody.
Thank you, Toma. I don't know if there's any question in the room or online. No? Yes. Conrad, I need a, thank you.
I have a...
Yeah, wait, you have the micro, because we need it for record the session.
Is it on? Yeah. I have a small question about another kind of marketplace.